Okay, the last thing you need to know before we move on to our first homework assignment is how to take in variables during the runtime of the program. So while the program is running, take in variables that come from you typing into the program and store them into take in numbers or sometimes characters from the keyboard and store them into variables. So if I was to say int, and I was just going to leave it as number one, the command to take in something from the keyboard is cin. So you know how there's cout, puts something output on the screen? Cin takes it in from the keyboard. And instead of two less than signs, there are going to be two greater than signs right here. And what comes after cin is what you store the input into. So what am I going to store the input into? Let's store it into this nice variable we have up here, number one. So now I have it so that when this program runs, it's going to take in number one and output it on the screen. And I'm going to change this expression here so it's a little bit easier to see exactly what's going on. I'm going to change it to number one plus 5. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to run the program, and it's going to be waiting for me. It's waiting for me to put in a number. And I'm going to put in, let's say, 19. And it's going to output 19 plus 5. So now something to keep in mind with C++ is that there's a lot of different ways to do a very similar thing. Instead of just writing number 1 plus 5 down here in the cout, I could instead make it so that number 1, let me make sure I capitalize that, number 1 equals number 1 plus 5. So that, in a traditional mathematical sense, if, equals was the same on either side, this wouldn't really be possible. There's not a lot of ways to go about, doing this. But in C++, since equals is just an assignment operator, I am assigning the value of number 1 is now equal to whatever the value of number 1 was initially, plus 5. And now, I don't have to have this plus 5 down here. Now, when I run this program, one second, I got to X out of the last time it was running. Yeah, the same thing should happen. I should be able to, oh, whoops, I forgot a semicolon right here. That's what's going to happen if you forget your semicolons. You should make sure to have a semicolon at the end of every statement in your program, inside of a function, that is, usually. So now I'm going to give it something like 3, press enter, and it's going to put out 8. So it does the same thing if you were to do the math up here and then output this down here. The last thing I'm going to mention before we move on to the next video, and I'm actually going to give you a quick homework assignment, is there's a couple of more operators, math operators, that you can actually use in C++ that are going to give you a few little shortcuts. So instead of like if I wanted to add a number to itself, or make a number equal itself plus something or times something, I don't want to have to keep writing, like, say here, number 1 equals number 1 plus something or times something, instead of doing that, because this is the same, I don't want to have to keep writing number 1 equals number 1 and then something else. I could instead do number 1 plus equals 5. And that's the same thing. It's going to work in the exact same way. So I'm going to write 4, and that's 9. It works the exact same way here. I could also, if I wanted to, use any other operator symbol, like times equals. Now, number 1 is now going to be equal to number 1 times 5. So let's say I do 2, so the answer should be 10. Alright, so that works. And it works with division, it works with subtraction. That works the same way. And the last operator I'm going to tell you about is incrementing and decrementing. So if I want to make it so that I only add 1, instead of having to do plus equals 1, which, you'd be surprised how many times you're gonna have to use just a simple incrementing a number by 1 or decrementing a number by 1 in your programming. So it's been made a little shortcut in this language that you can instead make number 1 plus plus. So what's going to happen when I compile and run this is I can make a number like 6, and it's going to output 7. It's going to increment it by 1, increase it by 1, and if instead of plus plus I want it to go down 1, I can go minus minus, and I can run it, and I'll put in 4, and it should output 3. And so, yeah, that's how the decrementing works. So you have incrementing, decrementing, and also some other mathematical operators. And remember how cin works as well. And we're going to give you a quick homework assignment in this next video.